I'm Orland Park Mayor Dan McLaughlin. The following program is brought to you by the Village of Orland Park.
Thank you everyone for coming tonight. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Carole Ruzich. I'm the chairman of the Finance Committee, a member of the Board of Trustees of our village. The mayor was happy to have Mr. Patlak come out here tonight and conduct the seminar. We really appreciate it. Unfortunately, the mayor couldn't be here tonight, so I am here in his place. And again, we'd like to thank you all for coming tonight. We are very fortunate here in the Village of Orland Park to be in a position to have rebated over $30 million in taxes since 2003. We know it's not enough. We know you want more. And you'd like to keep more of it in your pocket, which is why we have this seminar every year to help those of you who are interested in learning about how to appeal your taxes without having to go through the expense of hiring an attorney. So tonight I am very proud and honored to introduce Mr. Dan Patlak, who is currently serving his second term representing the 1st District at the Cook County Board of Review. He got into office in 2010, and he had previously served as the Wheeling Township Assessor from 2005 to 2009. He is a champion of empowering taxpayers through education and communication. So without further ado, Mr. Dan Patlak.
Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Thanks.
Have a good night tonight.
Thanks.
Hi everyone. Thanks for coming out tonight. I know it's rainy, but hopefully this will be productive for you. My goal for you tonight is that by the time you leave, you will know at least a little bit more about the overall property tax system in Cook County, and you'll know a lot more about how to file an effective appeal at the Cook County Board of Review. Before we get started, I'm going to tell a joke. A guy walks into a bar, and he sits down at the bar. He sees a bowl of peanuts. So he reaches for the peanuts. As he does that, the peanuts say, "My, those are very nice clothes you're wearing." The guy's startled. He looks over again. They say, "Yeah, you're a very well-dressed man, obviously highly intelligent, and clearly a leader among your peers." The guy's flabbergasted. These peanuts are talking to him. So he calls the bartender over. "Bartender, bartender." He says, "Yeah." Bartender says, "What?" He says, "Well, what's the deal with the peanuts?" The bartender says, "The peanuts? They're complimentary." Okay. So, one of the things people tend to get confused about is my office, which is the Cook County Board of Review, and the assessor's office, the Cook County Assessor. Now, the Cook County Assessor is responsible for assessing all property in Cook County. They do offer an opportunity to file an appeal on their assessments, but that's not their main job. That's our main job. If you think you're unhappy with the assessment that the assessor has put on your home, you can come to the Cook County Board of Review, file an appeal, present whatever evidence you want. We will review the evidence, and if we agree with you, we can lower the assessment. Our office is not part of the Cook County Assessor. It's run by 3 commissioners who are independently elected. Our office is located on the 6th floor of the county building. The assessor's office is on both the 3rd and 9th floor. So, if you had some dealings with the assessor, don't consider them as having had a dealing with the Board of Review, because we really are separate. As I've done these seminars, and I've done many over the years, there's a question that keeps on popping up all the time, and it relates to why, when property values go down or stay the same, do taxes continue to go up from year to year? And so up until this year, I always answered that question in a variety of different ways, and typically my answer took about 20 minutes. And I've been told by my staff that that's too much time because we spent a lot of time talking about how to file your appeal as well. So we've created a 5-minute video, and I'm going to let you see it, and hopefully you'll get something out of it, and then we're going to start talking about how to file your appeal. So Israel, if you can get this going.
I've lived in my home for 20 years. With the recent recession, the value of my home has decreased considerably. Why do my property taxes go up when the value of my home goes down.
Schools may account for over 60% of your property tax bill. The library, park district, local township, Cook County government, water reclamation district are some of the other taxing bodies that you pay. Each year, these taxing bodies have a levy meeting where they decide how much money they'll need for future operations. By law, the levy can only be raised 5% or the rate of inflation, whichever is less. Typically, the average increase is in the neighborhood of 3%. Let's say the high school board believes the levy increase won't be enough to cover the cost of new computers for the student library and determine an extra 8% levy is needed.
A referendum is a request for additional money that is over and above what is allowed to ask by law. So the high school's request for additional money is placed on the ballot during an election for the public to vote on. You may say, okay, they passed the referendum. We pay an extra 11% that year. But it's not just an extra 11% that year, it's an extra 11% going forward. Because once it's raised at the 11%, the following year when the high school has its levy meeting, they may raise it another 3%. It's 3% on top of the 11%. So what you have is a steadily rising demand for taxes, and that demand has to be met. And in most cases, the same property owners from one year to the next having to meet that demand. So you can see how you can end up paying more even when the value of the property is going down.
Let's talk about the second reason why taxes go up when your property value goes down. There are 102 counties in Illinois. All counties, except for Cook, assess residential and commercial property at the same rate. In Cook County, residential property is assessed 10% of value and commercial property is assessed at 25% value. Businesses pay 2.5 times more than residents. When a business closes, who pays the gap in revenue? When a business on a large property responsible for millions in taxes closes its doors, you've got a lot less revenue because a vacant building's assessment is reduced significantly. Therefore, everybody, residents and other business owners alike, have to fill the gap left by vacant properties. Here is the third reason your tax bill may have increased. If you received an exemption one year, but didn't receive it the next, you can end up paying more. Check your second installment bill in July to confirm. If you are not receiving exemptions you are entitled to, such as homeowners or the senior exemption, call the Cook County Assessor's Office. You can file a certificate of error to receive a refund.
I hope you found this explanation on why your property taxes go up when the value of your home goes down helpful. It's important to keep in mind that taxing bodies will get what they are asking for. Revenue must be met. If your taxes go down, someone else's will go up to meet revenue demand. I know no one likes hearing it, but at least you know a little bit more about why things are happening.
I hope that was a little bit enlightening. So now we're going to talk about how to file your appeal at the Board of Review. I worked at the Board of Review for 8 years for a commissioner named Maureen Murphy. Anyone ever hear of her? A couple of people. She had been a state rep out of Evergreen Park for 4 years, and she ran for Board of Review, got elected in 1998 and served for 8 years. And I worked for her. I did residential and commercial properties. And she did a lot of these seminars like we're doing tonight, and I would accompany her often. After a while, it got to be a lot to do for her, so I started filling in on a pretty regular basis. And it didn't take long for me to figure out that people were asking the same questions over and over again. So I started writing them down, and now I've sort of put together a presentation based on those questions. So I'm going to try to answer your questions before you ask them. And then when we're done, if you have additional questions, I will stand here and try to answer them for you. I also have staff, and they can help you as well if you have individual questions about something very specific to your own property. So the first question is, why should I file an appeal? There's a variety of reasons why you should file an appeal. Reason number one, it doesn't cost anything. There's no charge for filing at the Board of Review. The only cost to you is whatever work you might put in to find the information to prove that in fact you're overassessed. Now, of course, you have the right, if you want to hire an attorney to represent you. There are attorneys out there that do nothing but represent property owners at the Board of Review and at the assessor's office, and most of them are pretty professional and they know what they're doing. However, if you retain one of them, they will probably expect to be paid. So that is an expense that you might run into. I would suggest, though, that having come to the presentation this evening, you're probably not going to feel the need to hire an attorney, because you're going to walk out of here feeling empowered, like you really know what you're doing and you can do it on your own and save that cost. Reason number two, good chance for success. Back in 1999, when I first started working at the Board of Review, the success rate for appeals filed at the Board of Review was 54%. Now, some of those reductions that were received were small, some were large, but overall 54%. Last year, it was 62%. That number has fluctuated from year to year. It goes up and down. But I would say that, you know, if you were a professional baseball player and you hit 620, no team could afford to pay you. So, and the fact that you're here today, listening to me tell you how to file your appeal, I think that puts you in a better position than most average taxpayers who aren't coming to a seminar and really don't have a good feel for perhaps what the best thing is to do to get their assessment reduced. Next reason for appeal, potential yearly savings. And this is especially important for all of you who are from the south suburbs. Every 3 years, the Cook County Assessor assesses 1/3 of Cook County. Last year, he reassessed north suburban Cook County. This year, he reassessed south suburban Cook County. So if you file an appeal with our office this year, 2014, and you receive a reduction from us, I'm going to say 99% of the cases, that reduction will stick not only for tax year 2014, but also for 2015 and 2016. So, for filing an appeal and being successful 1 year, you can gain 3 years of savings. Now, that's not to say that if you're successful this year, and then next year comes along and you decide that you think that you're overassessed next year, you can still file an additional appeal. You can file an appeal with the Board of Review and with the assessor's office once every year and potentially receive a reduction. But the first year of the triennial reassessment is the optimum time to file, because if you're successful and you don't file it again for the next couple of years, that reduction stays in place. Now, I mentioned this is true 99% of the time. Probably in less than 1% of the cases, the Cook County Assessor will have some significant difference in opinion with us. And they are obliged by law to go with our decision for 1 year. So this year, 2014, they got to go with it. They could jack the decision back up in 2015, 2016, but again, that is in the very, very small minority of the cases. So with a few exceptions, you can count on your reduction staying for 3 years until you are once again reassessed in 2017. Last reason for filing an appeal. Let's suppose that you are convinced you're overassessed, and you go out and you gather up a lot of information and you turn all that evidence into us at the Board of Review, and then you wait at home for that letter that's going to tell you that your assessment's been reduced. We take a look at your evidence and we determine that in fact you're not overassessed, you're confused. You're really underassessed. We will not raise your assessment. So you don't have to worry about something bad happening at the Board of Review because you file an appeal. And if you use a comparable property that belongs to your friend or neighbor who lives nearby, and we determine that that neighbor is underassessed, we're not going to raise their assessment either. So you're not going to get yourself in trouble, and you're not going to get your neighbors in trouble. So really, there's no downside to filing your appeal at our office. So I hope those are some good reasons for you. Now let's talk about the next question, which is, how do I know if I'm overassessed? There are a variety of reasons why a person might file an appeal at the Board of Review. The most common reason is called lack of uniformity. And all that really means is that your property's assessment compared to other similar properties' assessments in your area is higher. Then there's a lack of uniformity. I would say about 95% of residential property owners who file an appeal at the Board of Review file based on lack of uniformity. So I'm going to give you a detailed explanation on how to file a lack of uniformity case. But before I do that, I'm going to go through a couple of the other reasons why you might file, and then I'm going to circle back around and give you the details on this one, since this is likely the one that you will use as your reason to file your appeal. So next reason is recent purchase. If you have purchased your home in the last 3 years, that means since January 1st, 2011. And it's an arm's length transaction, which means it wasn't a sale between two relatives, it wasn't a short sale, and it wasn't a foreclosure. Arm's length transaction. We will use the purchase price to help us determine what the assessment ought to be. So let me explain to you how that works. Let's suppose that your house is currently assessed at $30,000, right there, right? But a year ago, you bought your house for $250,000. We will apply the statutory residential assessment rate of 10% to your purchase price, which would be 10% times $250,000, and we will say that your assessment should go from $30,000 down to $25,000. Now, by the same token, if you bought that house for $400,000, obviously you wouldn't want to file an appeal based on a recent purchase, but in any case, we're not going to raise your assessment because of that purchase price, and we're not going to use that purchase price against you. So if you've got some other rationale for filing an appeal, like lack of uniformity or something else, we will look at that and we won't use the purchase price to keep you from getting a reduction. The evidence we need for a recent purchase appeal is your closing statement. Closing statement has the name of the buyer and the seller, the date of the sale, and the purchase price. We would also like you to fill out a little affidavit. You can just write it out yourself, saying that this is an arm's length transaction, not between relatives, not a short sale, not a foreclosure. Please give us your signature. It doesn't need to be notarized. Send that information in, and that will be sufficient for that type of appeal. Next reason for appeal, market value. The Cook County assessor puts a market value on every property that he assesses. If you believe that the market value that the assessor has put on your property is higher than what the true value of the property is, you could file a market value appeal. So what would be good evidence for that? Well, an appraisal would be good evidence. We consider an appraisal to be expert testimony. I do have to let you know, though, that we will not necessarily embrace the number from the appraisal. We're going to look at the appraisal, we're going to evaluate it, we're going to look at the comparables the appraiser used, we're going to look at the adjustments that he made in his appraisal. And if we think he did a good job, we'll use the number that he put on the appraisal. If we think he did a so-so job, we may adjust it a little bit. If we think he did a bad job, we won't use it at all. You could also go out and get comparable properties on your own of homes that have recently sold that are like yours, that have sold for less than what the assessor says your home is worth. And of course, this would be homes in your area. Where could you get that information? I'll give you two good places. One place is your local realtor. Local realtor has access to the multiple listing service. They can print up information on recently sold homes. There'll be a photograph of the home and a description, the purchase price, the date of the sale. It'll say whether or not it was a short sale or a foreclosure. In the case of a market value appeal, we will consider information about short sales and foreclosures. However, we will give much greater weight to homes that are arm's length transactions. So if you're going to give us, for instance, 10 comparable properties, give us at least 7 that are the arm's length transaction, and only 3 that are the short sale or the foreclosure. Don't do the opposite, because if you do, it's really not going to help you. Now the other place you can go for your information is to your local township assessor, Rich Kelly. He has a database which contains all of the sales data for Orland Township going back many, many years. And he can pull up comparable properties that are like yours, that are in your neighborhood, that have sold over the last year, year and a half, and provide that to you. There's one advantage of going to the township assessor is this. Township assessor has information on sales of all properties, while a local realtor will only have information on the sales of properties sold by realtors. One downside with the township assessor is that the information he has is about 3 or 4 months in arrears because he has to wait for the recorder of deeds to send him that information, and that's about how long they take to get from downtown over to the individual township assessors in each township. All right, next reason for appeal would be a mistake in the description of the property. The Cook County assessor keeps track of all properties in Cook County, and he has information about every property. And if you have a residential property, he's going to have information about the age of your property, the number of bedrooms and bathrooms. Do you have a garage? Is it a 1-car or a 2-car? Is it attached or detached? Is there a side drive? Do you have a basement? Is it a full or finished basement? The type of construction, the type of roof, do you have an air conditioner? Is there a fireplace in the house? All kinds of information. For our purposes at the Board of Review, the most important error that the assessor can make is in the living square footage of your home. The reason for that is this. If your home is 1,000 square feet, but the assessor mistakenly says that the house is 1,500 square feet, that means that you're probably paying about 50% more on the building portion of your assessment than you ought to be paying. And that's a big problem. And if that's the case, you want to come to us and show us that in fact the square footage that the assessor says is wrong and the square footage that you're claiming is correct. So how do you measure a home to figure out what the living square footage is? Well, let me tell you. First, you measure from the outside. So it includes everything inside the house. It includes the walls, the closets, the bathrooms, the hallways, and all the regular rooms, with these exceptions. Does not include an attached garage. Does not include the basement, even if it's a finished basement, even if it has a bedroom and a bathroom. If you live in a bi-level style home, you know the kind where you walk in and there's a living room, dining room, kitchen usually, but then you walk down 5 steps into the lower level family room. If that lower level family room is below grade, below ground, that should not be counted as part of the living square footage. If you have an unfinished, unheated attic, not part of the living square footage. If you have what they call a 3-season room, oftentimes they're built onto the back of the house, and you would use it in the spring, the summer, and the fall, but it's not heated, so you wouldn't use it in the wintertime, should not be counted as living square footage. Also, if you have one of those really nice colonial style homes, usually it's the kind you enter, you have sort of a center entry, and you walk in and there's what they call a foyer, a big foyer. Maybe it's 15 feet by 10 feet, 150 square feet, right? But you look up and you see not a ceiling that's 8 or 9 feet from the floor to the ceiling. You see a ceiling that's basically at the 2nd story. It's the bottom of the roof, right? In other words, there's no living space above what we call a 2-story foyer. Well, that's an error that the assessor might make. If they're looking at the house from the outside, they wouldn't know that there was a 2-story foyer. So it's possible that they might be counting an extra 150 square feet of living space that you don't really own. And this can be true also. Some people have a 2-story living room or a 2-story family room. And of course, those are larger and they could make for a bigger error. So if you've got this problem, come to us and prove to us what the real living square footage is of your home. So what kind of evidence would be good? Well, if you have a Plata survey, that can be good evidence, especially if it's a simple 1-story house. Because we can look at the Plata survey and we can say length times width equals the total living square footage. Fairly simple. Or if it's a simple 2-story, we could say length times width times 2. But many homes are not as simple as that. They have all kinds of twists and turns. They have different shaped roofs. which affects the total living square footage in the home. So sometimes a plat survey by itself is not enough. So if you can get us an appraisal usually has 3 places in the appraisal where it says the living square footage, and oftentimes that will have drawings by the appraiser showing the outline of the house and how he measured that house, and we would consider that expert testimony. If you've got architect's drawings, those could be helpful as well. I will tell you though, not all architect's drawings are equal. Sometimes they can be very clear and lay out very obviously what the living square footage is. Sometimes they can be very difficult to read, and so unless you can look at them yourself and say, oh, this is really easy, don't expect that that's enough. You could hire an architect to come to your home. You have to be state licensed and certified to inspect your home, measure it, write us a letter in his letterhead stating that he was at the house and he measured it, and stating what the living square footage is. You want to make sure that he's got his seal on that letter, and we would consider that to be expert testimony. My suggestion overall in a case like this is you have to imagine when you're reviewing your own evidence to see if you think that it is compelling enough to get a change at the Board of Review. Ask yourself, if a person who's never seen my home and never will see my home, if after looking at this information, will they be convinced that the house is the square footage that I claim rather than the square footage that the assessor claims? If your answer is yes, then you're probably got a pretty good case. If your answer is no, you might want to try to come up with more information. Also, photographs can be helpful. For instance, if you've got a house with a 2-car attached garage, you might want to take photographs so that and you're going to maybe provide us with a plat survey, photographs so we can tell where the garage ends and where the house starts. I can recall as an analyst at the Board of Review when someone had this claim on the foyer, the 2-story foyer. Of course, they could take pictures of it, but how would the analyst know how big that foyer was, unless, of course, you had architect's drawings or something like that. So what this clever person did is they laid down a yardstick, and then they took their picture. And then I, the analyst, could figure out pretty close how long that wall was, and they did it on each of the walls. It made it a lot easier to figure out. So in any case, error in the living square footage can be a significant thing to file your appeal on. Last reason for appeal, I'm going to take questions at the end. Last reason for appeal, vacancy. Let's say something happens to your house, like you have a fire, and as a result you're forced out of the house and you can't live there for a while you're settling with the insurance company and getting contractors to come in and fix the place up. If that's the case, we can grant you what's called a vacancy on the building portion of your assessment for the time period you're out of the house. So what kind of evidence would you need for that? Well, a fire marshal's report would be good evidence. Photographs of the exterior and interior damage to the home would be good evidence. Your insurance paperwork, good evidence. An affidavit from you explaining what happened and when it happened and so forth, good evidence. An affidavit from your neighbor saying that they witnessed that you had a fire, and as a result, the next day you packed up your car and you drove away and you didn't come back till a particular date. That's good evidence. If you have a letter from the village taking away your occupancy permit, then we know you had to be out on a particular day. And then if you have a subsequent letter from the village restoring your occupancy permit, that's great evidence. Had to be out on this date, we're able to return on this date. Give us as much information as you can so that we understand exactly what happened, why you had to be out, and the time period that you were out of the house. Now, it's not limited to fires. If you had some kind of severe flood that forced you out of the house, that would be something that would be worthwhile claiming on. If if a tree fell on your roof and made a big gash, forced you out of the house, if you got hit by a tornado and it took out a wall, if you've got a severe mold problem in your basement and that mold has been coming up the air ducts, mold can make you very, very sick. It can force you out of the house. That would be a reason. The most unusual case I ever had as an analyst at the Board of Review was, I think, way back in 2002 or 2003. A fellow came in, he was from Des Plaines, and he says, I've had to be out of my home since June, and it was already December. We had a hearing for this fellow. And I said, why? And he says, well, I've got a crack in my foundation. And I said, well, that's too bad, but normally a crack in the foundation does not force you out of your home. He said, well, the village pulled my occupancy permit. And I said, why'd they do that? And they said, well, it seems that I have an underground river flowing beneath my home, and it's causing the ground to shift, and as a result, my foundation is cracked. I said, okay, that's awful. But still, why do you have to be out of the house? And why did the village pull the occupancy permit? He said, well, the village is concerned that the ground is going to shift further, and as a result, the gas lines will rupture and my house will explode. And I said, okay, you got yourself a vacancy. So that's an extreme example, but whatever happens, if you're forced out of the house, let us know, and perhaps we can help you with that. So I told you that we would talk about filing a lack of uniformity appeal. So what I want to start talking about first on that is what we mean at the Board of Review by uniformity. We're looking at several major items. Item number one is your property classification. A residential property is Class 2. But within Class 2, there are subclassifications. Class 202, 203, 204, 234 is a bi-level, so on and so forth. When providing the Board of Review with comparable properties, we want you to provide us comparable properties that are the same property classification. So compare 202s to 202s, 234s to 234s, so on and so forth. Next is neighborhood. Every 3 years when the Cook County Assessor reassesses a section of Cook County, he will draw new neighborhoods in every township. The neighborhoods are not the kind of neighborhoods that we're accustomed to. They're not associated with a school or a church or a park. They're neighborhoods where the assessor believes that the housing is homogeneous. They could be several blocks wide and long. They could be several miles wide and long. Every neighborhood is assigned a number. Number 2, number 49, number 118. Whatever number neighborhood that your home is in, we want you to give us comparable properties from that numbered neighborhood. The only exception being if you have such a unique home that you cannot find any homes in your neighborhood that are like yours, then I would suggest you go to the next closest neighborhood or the next neighborhood that is most like your neighborhood. And of course, you'd want to let us know that you did an exhaustive search, you couldn't find anything to compare to, and you had to go to another neighborhood to find a comparison. Next is construction style. As far as the assessor is concerned, there are 4 construction styles. There's brick, which is the same as masonry, brick and frame, and stucco. Your house is going to fall into one of those categories. To the best of your ability, give us comparable properties that are of the same construction style. Now, we realize that when you're staying within the same property classification and the same neighborhood code, that may narrow your choices. So if it turns out that you find a comparable that's a block away that's just like yours, and yours is brick, but the comparable is brick and frame, that's okay. You can use that. We may make an adjustment on our end, but we're not going to throw out that comparable. It can be a good comparable. However, I would say that if you can find good comparables that are of the same construction style, that's better than finding good comparables that are of a different construction style. Same thing with age. If you have a 50-year-old home, try to find other comparable homes that are also 50 years old, or homes that are 40 years old, or homes that are 60 years old. Please don't compare to homes that are 10 years old or 110 years old. Those aren't good comparables. Square footage. The most common classification of a home in Cook County is a Class 203. The definition of a Class 203 is between 1,000 and 1,800 square feet and less than 2 stories. Now you might be saying to yourself, what do you mean less than 2 stories? It's either 1 or 2. Well, if you have a house that's the type that I grew up in with a roof like this, we called it a Cape Cod, the assessor would probably say that that house was 1.5 stories. So if it had 1,000 square feet on the first floor, the assessor might say that there's 500 square feet on the second floor, 1,500 total feet, so it fits into that definition of a Class 203. When looking for properties that are like yours, we would like you to stay closer to square footage than farther away in square footage. So for instance, if you have a Class 203 and your house is 1,100 square feet, we'd like you to give us comparable properties that are also 1,100 square feet, or 1,000, or 1,200. Now, we're certainly going to consider homes that are 1,700 or 1,800 square feet, but we're going to give more weight to the comparable properties that are closer in square footage rather than the comparable properties that are farther away in square footage. The same thing applies for proximity. While we would like you to give us comparable properties that are in your same neighborhood code, I mentioned that a neighborhood could be a mile or more long. So while we will certainly consider a comparable property that's a mile away, we're going to give more weight to a comparable property that's 3 blocks away, or 2 blocks away, or 1 block away, or ideally on the same block, or right across the street. So when looking for your comparables, my suggestion is sort of look in sort of concentric circles. Start out with a small circle around where your house is and try to find good comparables there. If you can't, then widen your search area, but the closer, the better as far as we're concerned at the board or review. A couple other things. Every once in a while, someone will dig up a bunch of comparable properties that are just like their house, except their house has a 2.5 car attached garage, and all their comparable properties have no garage at all. Well, we know that a 2.5 car garage adds significant value to a home, so if those homes are assessed a little bit lower, that's not going to help you to get a reduction on your assessment. So try to compare apples to apples. If you've got a home with a garage, try to find other homes with garages. If you've got an attached garage, but you find one with a detached garage, at least that's better than a home with no garage at all. Same thing with a basement. Sometimes people will find comparable homes that are just like theirs, but their house has a full basement, and the comparable home they're using is sitting on a slab or it's on a crawl space. And we know that a basement adds considerable value to a home, so it's really not a good comparable. So try to avoid that if at all possible. So now you know what we're talking about with uniformity. Next question is, how do I know whether or not my house is assessed higher or lower than these other homes that are like mine? So I'm going to tell you how to figure that out. And there's a little formula you use, and it's, by the way, it's in the handout that we gave you. So if you don't want to write it down, it's okay. It's already in the handout. But let's say that you have a Class 203 home. Let's say that the total assessment on that home is $25,000. Let's also say that the house is 1,500 square feet. The house itself, not the land. And this example is for lack of uniformity on the house, not lack of uniformity on the land. The assessor tends to do a pretty good job on the land, so most of our lack of uniformity appeals are based on lack of uniformity on the building, not the land. So anyways, now let's say we've got this assessment of $25,000, but the assessment's broken into 2 parts. The land assessment and the building assessment. Land assessment plus building assessment equals total assessment. Let's say that the land assessment is $10,000, the building assessment is $15,000. You want to figure out the assessment per square foot of living area of your home. In order to do that, you divide the building assessment by the building square footage. In this example, the building assessment is $15,000, the building square footage is 1,500, so you divide 15,000 by 1,500. If you divide 15,000 by 1,500, what do you get? Did someone whisper 10? Yes, you are right, it's 10. So if that's your house, you know, I'm at $10 a square foot. My house is assessed at $10 a square foot. What's everybody else at? So as you do your research, if you find that most of the other homes that are like yours are assessed at 9.5 and 10, 10.5 and 11, 12 and 13, you know that you're probably pretty fairly assessed. However, if you find a pattern of homes that are 9 and 8 and 7 and 6, you know that's your evidence to show that you are overassessed and you should get a reduction. So that's the formula I want to use. Now, next question is, where do I get this information? 2 good places. My favorite place is in your house, in the room where you have a computer. Because you can go to the Cook County Assessor's website, which is cookcountyassessor.com. It's in the handout. It's a great website. It has lots and lots of information about assessments and taxation, and also about exemptions, by the way. And just in case anyone doesn't know, the Cook County Assessor is in charge of administering all exemptions. Homeowner exemption, senior freeze, returning veterans, all that stuff is done by the Cook County Assessor. In any case, One of the things he has on his website is a database. That database contains information on all 1.8 million parcels of property in Cook County. He'll have a photograph of every property. He'll have a description of every property, including you and your neighbors. So my suggestion is to do this. Go into that database and first find your property. You can look it up by your PIN number or by your address. PIN number is better. Pull it up and print it out. It's going to print out as either 2 or 3 pages depending on how you have your printer hooked up to your computer. In any case, the first page or 2 will be the description of the property, the last page will be the photo. And by the way, we like photographs at the Board of Review. So please give us a photograph of your home, give us a photograph of the comparable homes if you possibly can. That does help us in our work. In any case, pull up that information and then in the white space on the first page of the description of the property, do that calculation I said and write the assessment per square foot. So if it turns out to be $11.28, write $11.28 and circle it. And at the very top of that page, there's a little white space at the top, write subject property. That's the subject of the appeal. The subject is your property, the property that's being appealed. Subject property, okay? Now I'm going to come back to that in a second, but I mentioned there were 2 good places to get the information. If you don't feel comfortable going on the computer, using a database, if it's just not working quite right for you, there's another place you can go, and that is your local township assessor, Rich Kelly, Orland Township Assessor. They've got a very good database which has all the same information that the Cook County Assessor has. It's organized a little bit differently, and I would say even perhaps a little bit better, because what they can do when you go in there, and if you give them your PIN number or even your address, they can look up your home, they can look up other homes that are like yours, and they can actually print them out by where they're assessed per square foot of living space. So they can print the, if there's 100 homes that are like yours, they can print up all 100, and they'll say where they're at per square foot of living area. And you might find that out of those 100 homes, there's 90 that are assessed lower per square foot than yours, in which case you know that you've got a lot of good evidence there to file your appeal. Or you may find that there's 90 that are assessed higher than yours, in which case you can pretty much figure out that you're not over-assessed. You probably should just leave well enough alone. But in any case, they can give you all that information, and they are there to help you. They help people all the time file their appeals at the Board of Review and at the Cook County Assessor's Office. Just so you know, Township Assessor is not the same thing as the County Assessor. Township Assessor does not assess any property. They're simply there really more as a taxpayer advocate to help people with their appeals, to help people get their exemptions if they need to apply for exemptions, and a wide variety of other services that they provide. So anyways, if you need a little help from them, they'll give you a little help. If you need a lot of help, they'll give you a lot of help. But back to doing it yourself. And my dream would be if everybody here could do it all by themselves and not have to depend on the government to do it for you. So you've printed out the information about your own property. Now you can do a query on the Cook County Assessor's website. You can do a variety of different kinds of queries. But for instance, you might say, give me every property in Orland Township in neighborhood number 11 that's a class 234. And it'll whip out every single property. It might be 10 properties, it might be 110 properties. Whatever it is, there'll be one line for each property. That one line will say the address, the total assessment, the property classification, maybe a couple of other items. And then depending on which ones you think sort of look enticing, you can click on it. It'll pull up the full description. You can see if the home, based on the photo and the description, is similar to yours. And if you think it is, you can do that calculation and see if it's assessed higher or lower per square foot of living area. And if it's assessed lower, print it out. We would like you to provide us with at least 3 good comparable properties. You probably don't need to give us more than 5, but you're not limited. You can give us more than 5 if you want to, but probably 5 is sufficient if they're good ones, if they're really similar to your house, and of course if they're assessed lower per square foot of living area. In any case, print them all out, do what I said with the subject property, except on these, for the first comparable, at the very top, write comparable number 1. Then comparable number 2, comparable number 3. And of course, in the white space on the first page there, write the assessment per square foot. and circle it. Once you've got that all done, and if you've picked out the properties you want to use as your comparables, take the subject property, put it on the top of the stack, take the comparable properties, put them in ascending order, staple in the upper left-hand corner, and you've got your package of information. At that point, if there's something more that you want to tell us, please feel free to do so. So if you want to write us a note, you can describe the property that you have provided to us. So for instance, you might say, Dear Commissioners at the Board of Review, please reduce my assessment based on the 5 comparable properties that I have provided to you. All of them are of the same property classification as the subject property. All of them are in the same assessor's neighborhood code as the subject property, all of them being within 3 blocks of the subject property, with comparable number 1 being on the same block, comparable number 2 being right across the street, and comparable number 3 being only 1 block away. All of them being within 300 square feet in living square footage of the subject property, with comparable number 4 being the exact same square footage as the subject property, and comparable number 5 being only 50 square feet larger than the subject property. All of them are of the same construction style. All of them are within 10 years in age of the subject property, with comparable number 1 being the exact same age and comparable number 2 being only 1 year older than the subject property. All are assessed at between $9 and $6 a square foot, while the subject property is at $11 a square foot. Please reduce my assessment accordingly. So you see what I'm explaining here, you're just sort of laying out your case and make it real easy for the analyst to understand what you're trying to communicate to him. And I would say, in a case like that, you probably have a pretty good chance to get a reduction. Next question. When do I turn in my evidence, and when do I actually file my appeal, my complaint, at the Board of Review? Well, as far as filing your complaint, the deadline for filing your complaint, if you live in Orland Township, is December 30th. I would suggest, though, that if you think you want to file a complaint, do it right away. Could I borrow that from you? So when you came in today, everybody got one of these paper complaint forms. Just a couple of things about this form. On the right-hand side is a place for you to put your property index number. It's possible that someone out there has 2 or even 3 property index numbers for their residence. Most people don't. But if you have more than 1 property index number, just simply use the second line for the second number and the third line for the third number. Don't put your comparable properties numbers here. This is not for comparable properties. The other thing I want to point out is what's written in red. It says, I request a hearing before the Cook County Board of Review, 119 North Clark Street, Chicago, and then there's a checkbox. If you would like to have a hearing at the Board of Review, that is your right, it is your privilege to have a hearing. Just check the box, and at some point in the future, perhaps a couple of months from now, you'll get a letter in the mail, and it'll say, please come on this day at this time to the Board of Review, 118 North Clark Street, and you can come in and you can talk personally to an analyst who is going to review your case. You can present your written evidence, you can testify orally, you can bring a witness if you want to testify to whatever you're trying to say. Whatever you would like to communicate to the analyst, you can do. I would suggest that if you're doing a simple lack of uniformity case, you probably don't need to come downtown and have a hearing. I would tend to reserve that for a more complex case where you believe that the written evidence that you're going to submit isn't really clear enough without some personal verbal testimony or an explanation from you or some other expert that put the information together. However, having said that, it's your right to have a hearing for any reason. So you don't, if you have a lack of uniformity case and you think it's a very simple case but you still want to come downtown, just check the box and you'll have a hearing. And by the way, I want to let you know something. I'm at every residential hearing. I'm usually there checking people in when people come in. And a lot of people are very surprised. They come to the Board of Review expecting maybe the typical government service that they've gotten in the past. But I want to tell you, we're very good. Check-in should take no more than 1 or 2 minutes. If there's a lot of people that show up at once, you'll stand in a little line, but the line moves pretty rapidly. Once you're done with that line, you'll sit down in a chair like what you're sitting in an outer room, and you'll wait for your name to be called. I would say typically we get people in within 5 minutes to go in and talk to an analyst. If we're very busy, you may have to wait as much as 15 minutes. But that's usually the most time you'll have to wait. And then, you can take as much time as you need to talk to the analyst. Most people can communicate what they want to communicate within 5 or 10 minutes. But if you need more time, if you need 15 or 20 minutes because you've got something really complex, we will sit and listen to whatever you have to say. So as far as filing this paper complaint, my suggestion is if you're going to do it that way, fill it out tonight, and before you leave, turn it into me or one of my staff members who's here. And we will take it downtown for you, we will timestamp it in, and then we will give it to somebody and they will enter it into our database. Now there's another way to file a complaint though, and it's actually one that I prefer. Although either one works and it's your choice. You can file online. You can go to our website, which is cookcountyboardofreview.com, all one word. And when you go there, it'll pull up the home page. And on the home page, in big purple capital letters, it'll say, click here to file or pre-file your appeal. Click on that, and it will take you to a portal where you can file the appeal. It's very simple. You do need to know your property index number, and you do need to have an email address in order to file online. If you don't have an email address, then fill out the paper form. But otherwise, the good thing about filing online is this, that when you get finished entering all your information, and it shouldn't take you more than 2 minutes, when you finish with that, it's going to ask you, would you like to print out your complaint form? I suggest that you say yes, and you print it out. And it will look very much like the one that you've been given, except that it will be filled out with your name, your address, your PIN number, and whatever other items that you filled in. And the key, though, is in the upper right-hand corner, where it says complaint number, there will be a complaint number. That's the number that files your complaint from the beginning of the process to the very end, and it's the number that proves that you filed a complaint. So if at some time down the road, for some reason, we tell you we never got your appeal, you've got your complaint form that you filled out online, and it's got a complaint number. You tell us the complaint number, and we're going to be able to find that complaint right away and eliminate the problem. By the way, if you don't ask for the complaint form to be filled out, even if you don't do that, an email will be automatically generated which will confirm that you filed your complaint and which will have the complaint number on it. The good thing about printing out the complaint form, and I would suggest printing out 2 of them, is this. You keep one for yourself, and then for your evidence, you attach that complaint form with your evidence, if you're going to mail it in or if you're going to deliver it to us. Now, the next thing I want to talk to you about is the evidence. Most people that are here tonight, you don't have any evidence with you, and that's fine. You can file your complaint without the evidence. You can file the evidence later. My suggestion is file your evidence as quickly as you can. If you can get it to us tomorrow, we'd like that. But try not to file it any later than the deadline for filing the complaint, which is December 30th. Now, that's not a drop-dead date. We will accept your evidence after that, but we try to get these files moving. We try to start analyzing them, and at some point, probably shortly after December 30th, the files will start getting rotated. And if your file has been put on an analyst's desk and then you turn in your evidence, we have to then go look for that file, and that can be difficult. But we normally do a very good job finding the file, but administratively it's difficult for us. So if you can get us your evidence sooner rather than later, that would be very helpful. As far as getting the evidence to us, you can deliver it in person. You can come downtown to 118 North Clark Street, bring it to us on the 6th floor. That's great. You can bring it to any of the 5 suburban satellite offices, which are located at the 5 suburban courthouses. I'm not sure which one is closest to Orland Township, but we have a satellite office and you can just bring it in. Now, I would suggest that if you file online, bring your copy of your complaint form, or at least the complaint number, and file that number with your evidence. Also give us your name, your address, your property index number. If you filed only on the paper, then give us your PIN number, your name, and your address. We will be able to match it up by that as well. Complaint number, though, for us is easiest. You can also mail it in. Just put it in a package, send it in. Again, make sure you've got information properly ID'd so that we know it's coming from you and we know what file to match it up with. Okay, so next question is, who's going to review my appeal? The Board of Review is governed by 3 elected commissioners, each from a separate district. My district is Board of Review District 1, and I represent the vast majority of suburban Cook County. I represent all of Orland Township. My two colleagues represent, they sort of split up Chicago. They have one has some of the near north suburbs and near western suburbs. Another one has some near southern suburbs. In any case, each of us has a staff of analysts who work for us and represent us when looking at appeals. So what will happen with your appeal is this. Your appeal comes into the Board of Review. Appeals are split up randomly. So your appeal may go to an analyst who works for me, but it may just as easily go to an analyst that works for Commissioner Rogers or Commissioner Cabanargi. Whatever analyst it goes to, that analyst will review your appeal, look at the evidence, come to a decision, write the decision in the jacket of the file. They'll initial their decision, and then that file will be rotated to an analyst who works for one of the other commissioners. That analyst will do the same thing, and then it'll be rotated to an analyst who works for the third commissioner. That analyst will make a decision as well. In order to get a reduction, 2 of the 3 analysts have to agree that a reduction is warranted. I want to assure you that our analysts will look at everything that you submit, whether it's a Plata survey or an appraisal or a letter or a newspaper article or photographs or whatever it is. They will look at it and give it whatever weight that they think is appropriate. I want to let you know that our analysts have access to a very good database. So even if you don't turn in any evidence at all, our analysts are instructed to automatically do a uniformity analysis on your property. And if they determine on their own that you're overassessed, you'll get a reduction. You may be saying to yourself, well, wait, if they can do it themselves, why are you asking me to turn in the evidence? And the reason for that is this. First, I think you know more about your property than anybody else. You know more about your neighborhood than anybody else. I also think you're your own best advocate, and you're going to work hardest to provide us with good information that's going to justify a reduction. So I encourage you to do it on your own. But if you can't, if you don't have time, if you don't know how, whatever the reason is, our analysts will do their best to determine whether or not you're overassessed. And if they decide that you are, you'll get a reduction. Last question. So you go through the whole process, and you turn in your information, and you wait for the letter from the Board of Review that will tell you of our decision. You finally get the letter, and it's either a no change, which means no reduction, or you receive a reduction, but it's not sufficient. It's not adequate, in your opinion, in terms of what your assessment really ought to be. Do you have any further recourse to file an appeal further? And the answer is yes. You have 2 mutually exclusive places that you can go to. You can either go to the Circuit Court of Cook County, in which case, if you're not familiar with navigating a courtroom, you may need to hire an attorney. There may be court costs, and you should know that the Circuit Court is backed up about 4 years in making their decisions. But if you want to exercise your rights to go to that venue, you can. The other option, I think, is better. It's called the Property Tax Appeal Board. It's a state agency, not a county agency, we're not an agency, we're an office, but it's not a county office, it's a state agency. You can file an appeal with the Property Tax Appeal Board. In my experience, they're pretty fair to homeowners. They don't charge anything. You can submit all new evidence if you want to, so you don't have to submit the same thing you submitted to the Board of Review or to the assessor's office. And as a matter of fact, they're not going to insist on even looking at what you submitted to the Board of Review. We may submit it to them, but they're not going to be asking for it. In any case, in order to file an appeal with the Property Tax Appeal Board, you first must have filed an appeal with the Board of Review. So if you're one of those people that has filed with us many times and for whatever reason has never received a reduction and you've given up on us totally, still file an appeal with the Board of Review, because that reserves your right to file further with the Property Tax Appeal Board. You will need to file your appeal with PTAB, that's the acronym, within 30 days of the date on the letter from the Board of Review. If you take more than 30 days, you may end up forfeiting your right to appeal at the Board of Review. One of the other things that you should have received when you came in today was a survey. If before you leave you could fill it out and let us know how we did tonight, we'd really appreciate it. And if you have any particular comments, either what you liked or something you didn't like or you think needs to be improved, please let us know, because we do look at every one. If you don't want to sign your name, that's no problem. the information you provide us is a lot more important than the name that gives it. So that's the conclusion of my formal remarks. If anybody here has questions, I'm happy to try to answer them. Yes, sir.